Hi, I'm Robert Tolpe. Today we're going to be talking about Lauren Singer. She's one of those influencers who has a mason jar filled with trash that they claim contains all of the waste they've made in the past 8 years. Is that even realistic or possible? Considering the lifestyle she lives, something isn't adding up. So let's talk about that, shall we? Lauren Singer is a 29-year-old blogger, YouTuber, and Instagram influencer who rose to fame back in 2015 for her remarkable eco-friendly lifestyle as part of the Zero Waste community, which is a group of people determined to make an impact on planet Earth by producing as little waste as possible. In this video, I will be addressing her claims and her actual impact on the environment, and why she might be causing more harm than good. I will be taking a holistic approach to this. I'm not going to nitpick on every little thing. I don't claim to be an expert on the subject either, so don't view me as an authoritative voice on this. Our story starts with the infamous mason jar, a symbol of the zero waste movement. Though picking apart every reason why it's unrealistic seems petty, it symbolically unravels the problems with messages that influencers like Lauren Singer are sending. But before we talk about Lauren's mason jar, I'd like to bring up another influencer first, and her name is Catherine Kellogg. In her article linked below, she recalls when she was photographing her own mason jar filled with her trash from the past 2 years, when she had a revelation. The longer I looked at the jar of trash, I felt like a phony. The trash jar really isn't an accurate representation of all the trash I've made. Almost anyone who has a trash jar has some sort of exception that they don't put in there, whether it be condoms, contacts, broken glass, receipts, etc. It feels like you can justify keeping almost anything out of it. And when you're constantly picking and choosing between what goes in the jar and what doesn't, you get a skewed perspective. This moment led to a period of reflection, where she realized that reducing the amount of waste she was creating down to a single mason jar distracted her from the amount of effective waste that was actually being generated from her lifestyle. In her article, she gives 3 reasons why the zero waste jar is, well, a bunch of baloney. Reason 1, upstream waste. The waste jar is only the direct waste that you yourself create in your home. The majority of the waste is made by producing the stuff you buy. As Kellogg claims, for every pound of waste you throw away, 7 pounds of waste are thrown away upstream. So if you have 1 mason jar, consider adding 7 more to your collection to symbolize the upstream waste that you are producing. Reason 2, stuff happens. Sometimes you generate a ridiculous amount of waste all at once, and it's completely out of your control. Like when an appliance dies and you have to replace it, you might need a new phone, or you're given a gift of 1,000 plastic straws by your spiteful ex-boyfriend, etc., etc. Kellogg admits that when stuff like that happens, she would just throw the offending item in the trash. After all, a defective toaster wouldn't exactly fit in a mason jar now, would it? Reason 3, bad habits. Because you're constantly worried about what you're putting into the jar, you commit environmental no-nos keeping stuff out of it. For instance, Kellogg admitted to recycling glass jars without the label, which is fine because the label gets incinerated when the glass is melted down. But she had no reason for doing this other than if she did remove the labels, she would have to put them in the mason jar. This creates a pattern of bad behavior focused on keeping stuff out of the jar rather than reducing the amount of waste overall, and not just the waste in the jar. Kellogg concludes her post saying she's considering ditching the waste jar altogether, and her commenters agree that she should probably kiss it goodbye. The fact is, the mason jar is nothing more than a fantasy. It's a sentimental little diary that reminds you of the cause you're committed to, and nothing more. And it's hardly an accurate measure of how much waste you actually produce. But that's not how influencer Lauren Singer presents her jar. In her interview with MSNBC, Lauren Singer, when the reporter asked her about the jar, flat out said, "This is my trash from the past 2 years. I mean, she admits that she doesn't put condoms in it, but that's it. And in her interview with Vox, when the reporter says, "You're really telling me everything else you've used for 4 years you found some other use for?" And she replies, "Totally, it's compostable, infinitely reusable, or 100% easily recyclable." Now that comment opens a whole can of worms. It is so incredibly misleading, I could make an entire video about just that sentence that came out of her mouth. But we're going to narrow our focus here by broadening it and just say, that statement isn't true. Not only is there nothing that's 100% recyclable, there's nothing that's infinitely reusable either, but for the past 7 or 8 years that she's had that jar, Lauren has most certainly generated a significant amount of waste that had to be thrown away. Whether it was the barista at Starbucks that gave her a plastic cup instead of filling her mason jar, or it was a cashier at the grocery store who put her items in a plastic bag, The sheer probability of an environmental no-no happening in her life is just too great to ignore, especially over the span of 7 or 8 years. What I'm trying to say is that mason jar is in no way representative of her actual impact on the environment. Not to mention all the waste produced by making the stuff that she's buying, even if she's not buying it in a container. What I'm saying is that mason jar is not representative of the actual waste she is producing. So why is she so adamant to claim that her entire trash from 4 years is in just that jar? Well, here is where her motives seem a little insidious. You see, in the MSNBC video, the reporter is keen to point out that she is a CEO of a sustainable company that helps people go zero waste by buying stuff. Now, the idea of her business in itself is fundamentally flawed. Us Americans can't shop ourselves out of our wasteful lifestyles. That's not to say her products, as expensive as they may be, are bad in themselves. I'm sure that buying dried powdered hygiene products versus buying them in liquid bottle form is better for the environment. But some of her products are outright useless and have no benefits, and will likely break and end up in a landfill at some point in time. Like this jade roller. You don't need it at all, it's definitely a want. And the bottom line is, to reduce the amount of stuff you throw out, you need to buy less stuff, not more useless things. And there's a lot of problems even with the useful stuff that she sells. We're gonna narrow our focus on this one pack of condoms. They are advertised as biodegradable because they're 100% natural rubber latex, but that is greenwashing. The condoms at the drugstore are also 100% natural rubber latex, and I guess you could call them biodegradable, and they most certainly don't cost $3 per condom. Not to mention they only come in a pack of 3 unless you want to spend $30, and they're enclosed in a fancy disposable tin. Well, I guess you could reuse the tin, but it's completely superfluous as the shipping container that it's in is going to be able to contain those condoms anyways. For a site called Package Free, they certainly do love their fancy, superfluous packaging. Oh, and I forgot to mention the environmental impact of shipping 3 singular condoms across the United States that are indistinguishable from any other drugstore condom brand. I don't know why these condoms are making me so angry. The carbon emissions alone are atrocious, as well as all the packaging and shipping labels required to get them to its destination. But I think Lauren is well versed in why e-commerce is terrible for the environment. She even says that businesses like hers should be accountable for the waste they generate. Now, she's talking about the beverage industry in this case, but I still think this quote applies to her. She says, "Businesses aren't held accountable for products that they're putting into the waste stream. They can completely wipe their hands free and do not have to subsidize any infrastructure to adequately recycle their product. So that responsibility of disposing that product falls on you as a resident and the government. That is completely unfair." Well, the words are there, but Lauren Singer doesn't seem to be putting her money where her mouth is. Her company, as far as my Google searching goes, has donated just about diddly squat to any organization that is making a documented effort into cleaning up the carbon emissions and waste that her business generates. Which means all of the profits from your purchases go straight into Ms. Singer's adorable reusable canvas bags. Well, it's not like the company's doing nothing to help the environment. They've claimed so far that they've kept 4 million plastic straws, over 3 million plastic bags, and over 1.5 million non-recyclable bottles and cups out of landfills. But there's no independent studies or research that corroborate their claims. It seems like Lauren has gotten out of touch with the goal of the zero waste movement she's the poster child of. Despite what her mason jar may tell you, in reality, as an e-commerce business owner, she generates tens, if not hundreds of times more waste than the average American. And it seems to some extent that that jar is a marketing tool to sell her useless jade rollers and expensive condoms. To make a net positive impact on this world, she'd have to sell actually package-free products from brick-and-mortar stores in densely populated areas, which would maximize the amount of waste reduction and minimize carbon emissions. And it seems like she's doing this to some extent. I don't want to say Lauren doesn't care about the environment. I'm sure she does deeply. She's a very smart woman and a marketing genius, and I'd like to think she just got caught up in the business side of things. I think she's just forgotten the fundamental principle of the zero waste movement, which is consume less. I admire her success, but I think the lifestyle she projects is not realistic or sustainable or practical in any way. I hope one day she realizes this and uses her platform to generate a net positive impact on this earth, rather than selling stuff and littering the earth with waste with her products. I hope this opens a door to discussion about that, rather than just attacking Lauren and her business practices. That was not my intention. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, comment, and maybe even subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. I work really hard on these videos. And thank you so much for watching. Peace.